In this bass lesson, you're going to learn how to use your two biggest weapons when it comes to muting strings, a classic problem for beginner bass players. Hi, I'm Luke from becomeabassist.com, and if you struggle with ringing strings messing up your otherwise good sounding bass lines, then stick around and I'll show you exactly how to fix it using a bulletproof muting method. You'll never have to worry about ringing strings ever again. This lesson comes from an email subscriber named Danielle who wrote me and said, "Hi Luke, I just wanted to say how helpful your lessons have been. Thanks to your lessons, I'm now able to play the opening riff of Stand By Me." Awesome work, Danielle. I just have a small question. When playing, is there any way to prevent the unwanted ringing of the strings? This is a classic beginner's problem. Beginners typically haven't developed any kind of decent technique yet, unless of course they've come over from another stringed instrument. So this kind of thing happens. You'll play a note and then lift up your fingers, and there's a kind of phantom ringing that happens from the note underneath. Now sometimes it's quiet and subtle, sometimes it's really noticeable, and it's almost like a pull-off when that kind of thing happens. And it can totally mess up an otherwise great sounding bass line. The good news is that thousands of people have had this problem before, which also means that thousands have overcome this problem, which means that you can too, and I want to show you exactly how. There are plenty of ways to deal with ringing strings, and I want to show you a few of them. First, let's talk about our left hand or fretting hand muting, and then we'll move to what you can do with the plucking hand. Now with the fretting hand, there's two places we can mute. We can mute the strings above the one we're playing and below the one we're playing on. Let's say I'm playing something on my A string right here. Now it might be tempting to make kind of big, huge arches with your fingers, like this, and really approach the notes kind of vertically, the ones you're fretting, from kind of right on top. However, doing this means you sacrifice the ability to mute with your fretting hand. Check this out. If I hold this note here, but I pluck all the other strings, they all ring out. If we take it to the extreme, we get this. So what should we do instead? Well, I'd encourage you to really kind of flatten those arches out, even just a little bit. This will allow you to do two things. It will allow you to mute the E string with either the index or middle fingers. For example, if you're playing with the index, you can just kind of rest your middle finger on the E string and vice versa, and then that E string isn't going to ring out. Same if you're using the index. Yeah, just like that. Now, if you're playing with your ring or pinky fingers, you can use the index and the middle finger, to do the same thing. Yeah, you can also get a similar result by slightly changing the positioning of your fretting finger and actually using it to mute the lower sounding string like this. So for example, here, I'm actually using the finger to fret this note right here, but I'm also muting the string next to it. Yeah? Now I'm not a huge fan of this method because flattening out your finger that much can hurt your dexterity a little bit, but sometimes it's your only option, so just keep it in your back pocket. Now doing any of these things means that string can't ring, so you've solved that problem for the lower sounding strings. But what about the higher sounding strings? In this case, the D and the G strings. Well, you've actually got multiple options when it comes to this, but it basically boils down to using either your pinky finger or using kind of this moderately fleshy part of your index finger to touch those strings so they can't ring. It'll look like this. Now say you're playing with your index finger on the A string. All you have to do with your pinky is rest them across the strings like this. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, don't press down hard. You're not trying to kind of fret the notes. You just want any latent string vibrations to get caught. Yeah, it's pretty simple, right? And even if you're using your pinky to fret a note, for example, that same note, you can still use this fleshy part of the finger right here to mute the strings. Yeah, just like that. The other option with this is to use kind of this part of your index finger to do the exact same thing. So for example, pressing down on fretting the D right here and kind of resting across the strings like this. Now again, you're not kind of pressing down, you're not trying to fret with this finger, you're just trying to stop the strings from ringing. Well, pardon me. And by the way, both of these options can work well if you're playing on the A string too. Yeah? Now one big thing you do have to be aware of and fight against is the harmonics on your strings. For example, if you're playing this D right here and the pinky is hovering directly over the 7th frets here, you'll end up activating the harmonics there. Yeah, the two ways to fix that are to rest your fingers somewhere where there are no harmonics. So in this case, we could just bring our pinkies down towards the nut a little bit and and it gets rid of a lot, but not all of it. And the other solution is just to touch the strings in more than one place. So with your pinky and another finger further up the hand. For example, like this part of the fleshy part of the finger there. Yeah, it stops the strings vibrating with the pinky and also the index finger. It's like a combination noodle and it works really, really well. Now the final part of the left hand muting that can easily be overlooked is simply releasing pressure on the notes that you play rather than having the fingers actually leave the strings. So for example, playing a note and then having the string ring after when you're done. Instead of doing that, just gently release the pressure instead of pulling away. So just leave pressure off right there. Now this does take a little bit more finesse and a little bit more precision, but it'll stop any, not all, but some of those annoying kind of phantom rings. So that's the fretting hand. Lots of things we can do to stop that unwanted ringing. The other weapon you have in your string muting arsenal is of course your right hand. Now obviously your right hand has a very important job of actually plucking the notes, but you can also use it to mute strings that you don't want ringing, especially if you're playing on your higher sounding strings like the D and the G. Check this out. Say I'm playing something on the D and G strings. If you look at my right hand, I'm actually holding down the E and A strings with the fingers that I'm not using in the plucking hand. That means if they ever want to vibrate and ring out, they can't really do that. These fingers are stopping that from happening. Surely there's still that sound, but they're not going to ring out when you don't want them to. Now even when I'm playing on the A string, I have a look, either my fourth finger here, like my pinky finger, and sometimes my thumb are on the E string, stopping it from ringing. It's not going to do anything there, yeah? And if I am playing on the E or A strings, and you're using the ideas I showed you from before with the fretting hand, then you won't have any ringing on your D and G strings. The other great thing about the right hand is that it can easily take care of any ringing on the string below the one you're actually on. For example, if you're playing on the G string, your right hand can automatically take care of any ringing on this D string. Yeah? If you're playing on the D string, it'll stop ringing on the A, and if you're on the A, it'll stop ringing on the E, but only if you're using the right kind of technique, and here's how. You do it by plucking through the string and landing on the one underneath. For example, if this D string is ringing, and I pluck through the G like this, I'm landing on the D string and my plucking finger automatically stops that string from ringing out. So the D string rings, play on the G though, it just stops it just like that, super, super easily. Now one classic beginner mistake is kind of plucking like this, kind of up and away from the strings rather than through them. And I definitely recommend playing through. It'll help a ton with the muting, but it'll also put you in a much better position in general. Now there is another plucking hand technique you might have heard of called floating thumb, and you can use this to mute strings as well. It's not quite as common, but tons of great bassists use it. Guys like Matt Garrison and Gary Willis, they all sound great using it, and it boils down to this. Instead of kind of anchoring your thumb on a pickup like this, or on your E string, or even on the A string, yeah, or anywhere else, your plucking hand thumb just kind of floats like this. And if you do it right, your thumb will always be muting the lower sounding strings that you're not playing. See here, the thumb is kind of resting on the strings. Kind of like your fretting hand fingers rested on the strings to mute them. It's kind of the same idea. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, just using the plucking hand. Yeah, this isn't a technique that a lot of people are comfortable with, and it's not something I really use myself, but you can try it out and see how it feels for you, and if it works better than anchoring your thumb like this, then great. You can add that as a weapon in your arsenal of bass playing and string muting techniques. If muting strings is something you're struggling with, then chances are you're still a beginning bass player, at least technique-wise. And if that's the case, then I have something I think you will love. It's called the Become a Bassist Beginner's Starter Pack. It's a collection of some of my best material for beginners and it shows you exactly what to work on that will actually make a difference in your playing. Not only does it show you what to work on, but it tells you the order to learn things in to give you the best shot of shaving months off your learning curve. And the best part, I want to give it to you absolutely free. Just click the first link in the description, fill out the form on that page, and I'll send it straight to you. To recap though, you learned how to use your two biggest weapons when it comes to muting your strings and having a crystal clear sound when you're playing. You learned that with the the fretting hand, you can mute the lower sounding strings with your index or middle fingers and the higher sounding strings with the fleshy part of your index finger or your pinky. And when you combine the two, you'll have a bulletproof method for muting with your fretting hand. You also learned about the plucking hand and using your idle fingers to mute the E and the A strings, as well as plucking through strings to stop the one from underneath from ringing. Thank you so much for checking this one out. Make sure you head over to the site to download that beginner starter pack. I'm sure you'll get a ton out of it. I'm Luke from becomeabassist.com, and I'll catch you in another video soon.